This is your fault, internet land. The reason that this thing exists is entirely because of your crazy SUV love affair that's happening right now. You see, Rolls-Royce discovered that you were parking an SUV next to your Phantom or your Dawn or your Ghost. And they found out that this SUV was either maybe a Mercedes-Benz, maybe a Land Rover, God forbid it was an Escalade. And they thought to themselves, you know what? That's just not acceptable. That should be another Rolls-Royce next to your Rolls-Royce. And so they've built this. This is the 2019 Rolls Royce Cullinan. It's the first SUV ever from the Rolls Royce brand, and it is pretty much as extraordinary as you might think it is. So let's get something off our chest right off the bat here. This thing costs more than the average family home in the United States. In fact, this thing costs twice the median average family home price between New York and California. Now, it starts at about $325,000, but if you get one just like this, which is fully optioned and loaded to the gills, it actually comes in at $420,000, which is actually twice what you would pay for a really nice family home. Now, if that number really doesn't bother you, then great, you could probably afford one of these things. But if you're like me and there's no way in hell you're ever going to be able to afford to buy one of these things, well, stay tuned. And we're going to have a couple of really interesting features to show you, and maybe a couple of not so interesting ones. The Cullinan is really long, it's really wide, it's supremely comfortable, especially in back. You've got these rear opening coach doors, which are kind of special. The Phantom has them too, but when they're open like this, it's kind of a hard reach to get to them. Plus, they're really heavy. And that would require physical exertion to close it, and the Rolls Royce isn't about physical exertion. That's not money at all. What we need is a button, something that we can push to automatically close the door, and the Cullinan has 4, one in each spot to close the doors. In the back seat, it's here on the D pillar. Just push and hold, and it automatically envelops you in silent luxury. In true British utility fashion, you can order your Cullinan up in what they call the individual configuration, in which case you have 4 passenger seating, 2 in the back, separated by a console, but it also separates the cargo area from the cabin with this glass partition. Now that's really nice in keeping the cabin very quiet and separated from the cargo area, and it prevents the muddy hunting dogs from getting their paws all over the beautiful Arctic white leather and the black lamb's wool carpets. Now, if you absolutely have to have a 5-passenger SUV, you can order the back in what they call the lounge configuration, and it gets rid of this console. But if you do that, you're going to miss out on a couple of things, such as your lovely whiskey decanter and tumblers, and also your champagne fridge, complete with Rolls Royce flutes. So if Dr. Evil has taught us anything, it's that being rich and powerful means you can have laser beams attached to just about anything, whether they be sharks or ill-tempered sea bass, or super luxury SUVs. And the Cullinan actually has laser beams up here in the headlights. The Cullinan and the Phantom both have laser beam headlight technology carried over from Rolls-Royce's BMW owners. The low beams are LEDs and operate below certain speeds, but when the traffic clears and the road gets dark, the adaptive laser high beams kick in. They enable you to see up to 650 yards down the road, nearly 2,000 feet or just over 1/3 of a mile. And they're not like traditional low-beam, high-beam headlights. They kind of flow and adapt to the constantly changing conditions. One of the best things about the Cullinan is the way it rides. It is so smooth. It is so quiet. Potholes? I remember potholes. And, you know, railroad crossings? Didn't feel a thing. It's like it wasn't even there. The ride of the Cullinan is absolutely superior to just about anything I've ever driven. It kind of feels like a 60s or 70s car in that regard, and then it just floats along. But it's got better body control than anything, frankly, I've ever driven with a ride like this. It truly is exceptional. How can so many cylinders make such little noise? It's a 6.75-liter V12 twin-turbocharged engine, and it makes ungodly power, but it's so absolutely smooth. It's like driving an electric car. They've done an amazing job making this just a serene, calm experience. The only thing nerve-wracking about it is you're worried that something's going to hit it or ding it or scratch it, and after you've paid that much money for it, that's the last thing you want. So you've arrived at the equestrian event, or maybe the Catalina wine mixer, and there's just no more room in the luxury skybox, but you know what? The Cullinan has you covered. This is called the viewing suite. Push a button on your open tailgate and this slides out. A 2-seat leather-covered tailgate bench with a cocktail table. It's perfect for watching your brood performing their show jumping competition or maybe observing the latest helicopters for sale. I mean, come on, it's not like we're going to be grilling brats and tossing a pigskin at the Lions pregame parking lot tailgate party, are we? Peasants. But as amazing as this really expensive SUV is, it's not perfect. There are still a few things that annoy me about the Rolls Royce Cullinan. One of the things is this key fob. This really feels kind of cheap. Yes, it's done in the same turquoise leather that the interior accent is done in, which is just Italian for turquoise, but it feels so ordinary. It feels so plain. There's only a couple of buttons on the thing. It doesn't have any heft to it. I mean, if you're spending this kind of money on a vehicle like this, I want this to be just as much jewelry as some of these interior pieces are. And this thing really doesn't feel any more special than you get in a Subaru Crosstrek. One thing I find actually really kind of ordinary about the Cullinan is the multimedia system. If you're familiar with BMW systems at all, you're going to find this one very familiar as well. It is basically the BMW system. Now, BMW owns Rolls-Royce, so it does make sense that you'd see some kinds of parts sharing, and this is one of the areas where you don't really want to reinvent the wheel, even though there is a click wheel or a touchscreen. However, you know, it works pretty well. It looks fairly plain, but it's easy to use. So, I know what? I'm going to let them go with this one. Why on earth would they replace the beautiful bejeweled gauges in the Rolls-Royce vehicles with these boring digital screens? The car is supposed to be about artistry and motion, but these are gray and they're boring and they're plain. There's so many nods to tradition in the Cullinan, like the wonky climate-controlled temperature sliders instead of an actual automatic climate temperature number, or the push-pull sliders for the vent controls. Making the thing you look at most in the vehicle into something so mundane is really kind of a shame. But these are minor quibbles in what is an extraordinary achievement from Rolls-Royce. This thing is quite unlike anything I've ever driven. It is smooth, it is fast, and anything you might read about it sharing some history or some parts with BMW, quite frankly, isn't important. They've made such a distinctly, honest-to-God, amazing luxury vehicle that, you know, the old adage applies. If you have to ask how much it costs, you can't afford it, and if you have to ask why, you really don't deserve it. This thing is deserving of the praise and the price. And if you'd like to learn more about the new Rolls Royce Cullinan, you can look everything up on cars.com.